Serious? What's the creepiest, most unexplainable thing that happened to you? I was 12 and had just gotten my first mobile phone. One weekend, I get a call from an older sounding man with an Australian accent. Not that weird. I live in Australia, but kinda relevant. He asks, "Is this my first and last name?" I go, "Yes." He takes a deep breath, sounds really emotional and says, "I'm your grandpa." All I could say was, "No, you're not." Both my grandfathers had been dead for years by that point. Plus, they were both European. I'm first generation Australian. There's no way that even if one of my grandmas had been getting side action that this guy was my grandpa. He sounded disappointed and hung up. Haunts me to this day. That's really sad actually. I hope he found the grandchild he was looking for. Our family cat passed away when I was 14 and it really sucked. He was a great cat. Fast forward to 16 years old and I'm sitting by my mom on the couch and she's showing me something on Facebook on her iPad when I swear I saw a cat out of the corner of my eye, so I look up and it's our old cat walking into the kitchen rubbing his tail against the wall as he made the corner as he always did. My mom also looked up just after me and stared and looked back at me and I was like, "Did you just see our old cat?" She replied, "Yeah, he just went around the corner there." I got up and went and looked in the kitchen and he's nowhere to be found. 10 years later my mom and I still talk about how creepy that was that we both saw it. My brother passed away in 2008. Fast forward to 2016. I was asleep and I had a dream about him, as I often did since he passed away. This dream was different. It was like he was talking directly to me, looking straight in my eyes. In the dream I asked him, "Is it really you?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Prove it." He then reached out and touched me on the arm, and when he did I jolted up in bed wide awake covered in sweat. I thought all this was really strange and I went to the bathroom to put some water on my face. As I was looking in the mirror, I saw that there was a backwards R written on my arm and pen exactly where he touched me in the dream. The letter R was the first letter of his name. There were no pens in my bedroom, and I have never sleepwalked before. You can call me crazy, or lying or whatever, but that was the single most unexplainable thing that has ever happened to me. Once when I was 8 or 9, me and my cousins went down to play on this gated community I lived. We were on the inside of this fence when this taxi driver pulled up, asked if we wanted to go to the Magic Kingdom or something cheesy like that, pulled a saxophone from his trunk and started playing while inviting us inside his car. I still remember my mom's face when I told her later that day. Every time my mother cooks a specific dessert, an earthquake happens in Chile. That only happened twice between 2015 and 2016. Strangely, the two earthquakes had almost the same magnitude. Guess you could say her recipe is groundbreaking. Was giving my then 2, maybe 3-year-old daughter a bath when staying at an old house holiday rental. We had play cups, saucers and a teapot which she was filling up with the bath water and pouring into the cups. "This one is for you, Daddy, this one is for me, and this one is for the old lady in the doorway. No one there." Chuckles, haha, I'm in danger. I had a dream a few weeks ago. Bad times in my life, right on the cusp of things getting much better. They are now, and I was sleeping badly and just not mentally well. My favorite uncle, closest thing I had to a dad growing up, actual dad was not good at dadding, died suddenly of a heart attack a few years ago. It was abrupt and shocked everyone. I was across the country and distraught by the news. He was by far the closest of any of my family members. I was dreaming about something irrelevant to him or anything, and suddenly I turned around and there he was, just standing there holding his arms out and grinning like, I just lost sense of the dream immediately. I was so thrilled to see him, like the dream was a work assignment and he was just showing up to break the monotony. I jumped into his arms and hugged him and kept telling him how happy I was to see him. The rest of that dream, he just hung out with me. I was just so happy. I've never had an experience like that because honestly I've always been the aloof black sheep of my family and I never imagined anyone would care to visit me after they died, of all people, if such a thing is possible. But there he was, and it will stick with me always that maybe he just came to say what's up and give me a little slap on the shoulder and make sure I kept on trucking because better stuff was coming. I miss him. Fiance shot himself several years ago. He ended up showing up in a dream of mine and just hugging me and wiping my tears and insisting that it was okay and that things were better now. Part of it was a lot of bad health problems that just weren't going to get better. I woke up and I could still feel his fingers on my cheeks and smelled the tobacco he used to smoke. I don't smoke and never have. My parents and brother were out. He was meeting his friends and my parents were somewhere. I can't remember lol. Fast forward a couple hours later or so. It's dark now. Whoopee. And I hear something downstairs. A thud. Then I hear a flipping hello. Number 1 was home. Except me. I go to the landing at the top of the stairs and say hello thinking it was my brother coming home, as he rode his bike and would put in the garden shed and come through the back door. I get nothing in return. My brother likes to scare me a lot around the house, so I start thinking it's him. He's gonna scare me in 3, 2, 1, nothing. I go down 2 stairs and say hello, peering over the banister to see if I can see my brother hiding, waiting for me to come downstairs. Nothing. He came home an hour or so after that happened, and my parents came home about 10 or so minutes after my brother did. To this day, I still have no clue on what the heck said hello. Definitely someone hoping to rob the place. Thanks for the nightmares. This actually just happened last week. I've been traveling for work a lot recently, and as such I stay in hotels. Not extraordinary, nor are they heck holes. Just regular generic hotels. Well, the one I was at last week had an elevator that was annoyingly slow. Everything it did was slow. Whether it was coming to your floor, opening or closing of the doors all took what felt like forever. I'm leaving the hotel to go to the gym, and as I approached the elevator, I saw a little girl standing in the elevator. Assume little girl, just saw short figure with long hair. Didn't catch the face because the door was closing. I figured I'd give it a second. I didn't want to press the button and have the door stop closing and the little girl have to stand on an elevator with a big adult male she didn't know. I waited, maybe 3 seconds after the door shut, and then pressed the elevator button. The elevator that I saw the little girl standing in opened, and she was nowhere to be seen. I then took the stairs. I often have meaningless dreams about certain situations which I tend to forget about quite quickly. But fast forward a few weeks in real life, I'll be in that same situation. We'll repeat the same dialogue. We'll be wearing the same clothes. We'll be talking to the same people and I'll only realize a deja vu until after the moment has passed. It happens so often. I've come to expect it now. Yes, same thing. Never about anything important. Just mundane stuff not out of the ordinary from what usually happens. I started keeping a dream journal to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. I was really depressed as a 14-year-old teen. One day while I was sitting in the bus station, an old man touched my arm and said, "Don't worry, you will move out when you turn 17 and everything will get better." 17 was when I moved out of my abusive home. Maybe you subconsciously wanted to live up to the man's expectations and that's what pushed you to move at 17. I had sleeping issues as a kid, so I was often awake during the middle of the night. One particular night I was frightened by some people shouting at each other outside. I grew up in a dodgy area of Mayo, so I slept in with my parents for a while. I close my eyes for a bit, then when I open again I see a girl with huge black eyes, a nightgown, hands behind her back and hip-length hair just standing there staring at me coldly. I hide under the quilt for a bit, then when I pluck up the courage to look again she's nowhere to be seen. I didn't even hear her come into the room, let alone leave. I do have an older sister, but she was fast asleep in her room and obviously I would have heard her footsteps and she looked nothing like this girl. Sounds a lot like sleep paralysis hallucinations. I spend a lot of time in the woods and occasionally camp in the bed of my truck with a tarp tented over it. While this makes for great rain protection, I can't see out at all. I was camping in Georgia up in the Allegheny Mountains. It was foggy night, which isn't too uncommon, and I was laying in bed getting ready to go to sleep when a bunch of coyotes starting howling and barking not too far away. This isn't too unusual, but I'm still not totally used to it. What happened next though is what was so creepy. Normally, when coyotes go off, it builds up and then dies off slowly. I heard a coyote yelp as if it had been injured and it went dead silent. Then I heard a quiet crunch of the leaves as something got closer. Then the crunch of the stones as it got to where I was parked. Then it was silent. It was then that the distinct sound of a nail on my truck side rang through my ears like nails on a chalkboard. Something was just feet from me, then nothing. It brushed my tarp and that was the last of it. Silence. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning I got out and all I could find was a scratch on the side of my truck from the nails and a single coyote footprint. My guess is that a coyote hurt itself, which spooked them, and one came in close to check out the smells of my camp. But that night had to be one of the absolutely creepiest nights of my life. Whoa, yeah, today would do it for me. No use trying to sleep after that. After moving to LA, I ran into my ex-girlfriend 5 times over the course of 2 months. For context, I had moved from South Orange County to LA for a nice office job. My ex-girlfriend had moved to San Diego after the breakup, then moved to LA after breaking up with her last boyfriend. I would have chalked it up to random chance that we now lived a few miles from one another, except when we first noticed one another, she immediately said, "I'm not stalking you," suspicion intensifying. Thankfully, after a 5th time we ran into each other, I didn't see her again for almost 5 years. When I was getting ready to move back to Hawaii, I had the foresight to lie about which island I was moving to, just in case she decided to follow me at some point. Stayed in a luxurious resort in a small island with 3 of my friends when we were in high school. My friend's dad was the manager. This was a tiny island. You could walk around in less than a day and there were only a few suites. Very exclusive, and it was far from the nearest town. At night, it would get really dark and peaceful. The staff there always talked about how they have had strange or ghostly encounters throughout the years. For your information, this island was used as a camp hiding place for soldiers back in the day. It still has the lighthouse they used that's over hundreds of years old. Anyway, our room had 2 king-sized beds. In the middle of the night while everyone else was asleep, I woke up suddenly and felt extremely hot. I was sweating like crazy even if the AC was on full blast and it was blowing straight at me. I felt something weird, like a presence, next to my side of the bed. I've never felt so scared in my entire life that I was shaking and sweating profusely. But what was really crazy was that only one side of my body was hot, the one by the edge of the bed. The other was cold. I hid under the blanket and closed my eyes as hard as I could because I was afraid that if I opened it, I would see something. I felt the energy of that presence get closer to me, like we were face to face. I kept inching towards my friend who was sleeping next to me. After a while, it suddenly disappeared and I wasn't hot anymore. The next morning I didn't mention it to anyone, until they talked about how cold it was in the bedroom. They were freezing the whole night. Then I told them what I felt at night. My friend who slept beside me got really quiet. She told me not to freak out, but she woke up last night too and she saw a girl standing next to my side of the bed and just staring right at me. I've never not believed in ghosts, but I also don't necessarily believe in them, if that makes sense. But I just can't explain that night. It was the first time I had experienced a feeling I just couldn't explain or shake off. Still bothers me to this day. One night, probably around 2 AM, I was sleeping and dreaming. I can't remember the dream, but in the dream, it all of a sudden got quiet and everything became still. A voice in my dream comes out of nowhere and starts saying, "Wake up. Go to Nicholas, my 3-year-old son. Room now. Wake up. Wake up." Me, my real name. Wake up. I wake up and lay there for a few seconds, thinking how weird of a dream it was. I chalked it up to a crazy dream but decided to go check on my kids. I head to Nicholas' room and open his door. He sleeps with a pretty bright nightlight and all the other lights off. When I opened the door, I saw a shadow figure standing at the foot of his bed. I immediately threw myself over my son and started screaming to the figure to go away. The shadow rushes to the window and hops out. I lived in a trailer at the time. Our windows were double hung, the kind that slides up and down, and we had screens in all of them. This was during the summer, so I kept the windows open often. My husband works nights, so I scooped my son up and went to my daughter's shared room and locked the door. I called 911 and the police were there in like 10 minutes. What happened was my neighbor had a nephew staying the summer with him. The nephew was 18 and was going to be helping his uncle at his construction business. His uncle, my neighbor, and my husband sometimes share a beer or two and talk outside. My husband was telling the neighbor how he would be on night shift the next few weeks. His nephew overheard and chose to break in one of the nights he knew my husband was working. He swore to the cops and everyone else he only broke in to steal crap for his drug habit. He didn't have a record for harming children or nothing like that, so he may have been telling the truth about looking for money or crap to sell, but who knows? Another time, I was sleeping when the voice came again in my dream. Like the last time, everything in my dream went silent and still, and again I can't remember the dream. The voice comes again and says wake up, Ami, go to Nova. Nova needs you. Nova is my daughter. She was 6 at the time. I woke up and immediately hauled butt to the girl's room. Before I even opened the door, I could hear her. Nova has severe asthma and has been hospitalized more times than I can count. I heard her wheezing and struggling to breathe. I turned the light on, grabbed her inhaler and a steroid that she has to take when her asthma gets bad and screamed for my husband to call 911. He was home that night. The ambulance came and took her to the hospital. Her oxygen levels were dangerously low, so she was in the hospital for about a week. If I didn't get to her in time, she would have died. I haven't heard the voice since. I have no idea what it was. Maybe mother's intuition, maybe a subconscious thing, maybe a deceased family member or friend helping me out from the other side. Oh my god, you must have been so panicked both times. You have a powerful connection with your kids, and maybe something else a little extra. Very cool stories, thank god you're all well. Thank you for sharing. Friend of mine was in a hot tub with me. We were having fun and nothing was out of the ordinary. She looks at a plane in the sky and her whole demeanor changed before she said, something bad is going to happen. No, like serious. Something awful. I don't know. She isn't a person to do this. Seriously, she had never said anything like that before. Turns out, that night, a guy at our school and his whole family got in a terrible plane accident that killed his mother, brother, and sister. He survived but was in a coma for weeks. Have no clue how she knew, but I always listen to her when she says something is off. This is the first story in here to actually give me chills. Witnessing that deep, primal, inexplicable intuition always makes my hair stand on end. When I was 10, I woke up one night and saw smoke in my room and ran downstairs to tell my mom. She went to take a look and didn't see anything. A month-ish later, I was about to go up to my room when I saw smoke bellowing out the door just like in my vision. The house was a total loss. About 12 years ago, was sleeping on the bed beside my wife who was awake and reading. Pre-parent, was just drifting into dream state when an entity made an appearance in my dream. The entity was jarringly at odds visually with the rest of the dream. Style appearance was dazzling, solidly defined and detailed, making the rest of the dream appear to be a washed out of focus film being shown in the background. In fact, the out of placeness of the entity was so jarring it shocked me, flinchingly awake when it stared at me. My flinching caused my wife to ask me if I was okay. I don't know what compelled me to ask the following, but I asked her to close her eyes, clear her mind and describe the first thing she saw. She described the entity to near perfection. Physical appearance, headgear, color, facial expression, the lot. The most notable features being the construction style, big kinda knot, hat and the shimmering golden color. A few years ago on a couple of occasions, my 2-year-old asked me and my wife who was the Goldie man with the hat standing behind daddy. The most notable features being the construction style, but kinda not. Swore for a split second you called the entity kinda hot. Not really creepy, but one time while staying with my grandma, I was asleep when I was jolted awake because I thought someone had placed a Bluetooth speaker right next to my ear and was blaring mariachi music. As soon as I opened my eyes, it was dead quiet and the whole house was asleep. Some months later, I told my GMA about it and she nonchalantly responded, "Oh yeah, that sometimes happens to me, lol. The mariachi ghost seems pretty chill." I was on a walk through my safe neighborhood when I went past this house where these notably odd people live. I moved to the other side of the road as I was coming around a curve. All of a sudden this older guy started following me. I didn't think much of it as a lot of people were out that evening. A few blocks later he caught up to me and started walking next to me. I walked a bit faster, hoping with the age of this guy, he would slow down a bit. I eventually lost him and I disappeared behind a tree. He was there, as if he knew where I was going to go. He started reaching out for my shorts, but I ran as fast as I could. Luckily, I made it to my house and locked all the doors. A few days later, I went on a walk, and I didn't see him again. Nor did I see him ever again. The look in his eyes, it was just dead. It was like two black holes were staring back at me. I will never be able to forget him, just for that. This is very explainable. You were attacked by a predator, but fortunately you escaped. I was 8-9 years old at the time, sleeping alone in my bedroom when I saw a flash like someone is photographing me. Not once, but like 15-20x. I clearly saw the flash coming from a closed door. I even saw like a rectangle point from where the flash was coming. It was late night. We were living at 7th floor of tall apartment and there was no rain outside to explain the flash. I got scared. After 5 or so minutes I grasped the courage to go outside the bed and ran to parents to tell them. They calmed me and told me that it was my imagination. Till today I am sure and remember what I saw and I cannot explain it in any way. Your eyes were glitching. I'm serious, it happens. I don't know the exact science, but it's like a spasm and your brain tries to fill in the gaps. I have this thing that I get glimpses of a moment in people's lives. Imagine a GIF version of a moment of their life. It happens randomly. I cannot control. Could just be an overactive imagination, but I know there is accuracy in those glimpses. One day while talking to my manager I got a glimpse of him being violent towards a woman. No idea who she was, but I could see him harming her. I made it a point to kind of avoid any personal interactions with him because he was always very persistent on making his employees his friends outside of work. Some time later it comes out that he was being charged with sexual assault and a ton of women that worked with us came forward saying that he would be inappropriate with them. Could just be a huge coincidence, but that vision of him harming the woman really stuck with me and reflected a lot of what came to light about him. Not even a year ago I had my friend over for a sleepover and fast forward to like 2 AM we got bored, so we're outside just throwing paper airplanes we made. I threw mine and went out to get, and all of a sudden just felt the most fear I had ever felt for no reason and look over to my friend on the patio and watch a big orb just flat over him. Keep in mind I did not know that orbs had stuff to do with the paranormal. But something inside me just told me that we had to get out of there, so in a low voice I just said to go inside, and he was really confused because at this point I was acting very scared and off. But I just raced to the front door and went in and he followed, and we got to my room and I told him what I saw, and for some reason I started to have tears roll down my face for the first time in years. Thinking back on it and I'm still very confused. A relative or my dad's had passed and he woke up in the middle of the night seeing a bright dark glowing orb. This was a few hours after the relative passed. He had no idea of it yet. I like to think that's his relative's goodbye. Oh, sorry, thought of a second one. My brother slept-walked terribly as a child, to the point my mom was worried for his safety. He's 10 years older, but the most traumatic event I've been told is when he was found at the end of a dock, staring into a Michigan lake in the fall. Fast forward a decade and I did the same exact thing, but my mother never told me because it was the only time I had ever sleepwalked and she forgot. My dad told me that one night his brother had been studying Latin for hours. They went to bed and his brother started sleepwalking around the house speaking Latin. I imagine that was pretty dang creepy. I was coming home from work. Next thing I know, I woke up in bed. Had giant headache and flashes of seeing alien creatures looking at me. That day, I noticed I had bruises on my groin and subsequently I didn't have an erection for about a month. Worst part was my roommates asking me where I had been all weekend. I had lost 2 days. No, I don't use drugs and only occasionally have a few beers. I was babysitting this little girl and she said there's another little girl that visits her every night. She said this little girl used to live there but she died and now she comes back to play with her. I was a little weirded out by that, but I didn't believe in ghosts, so I just assumed she was making up stories. That night after I put her to bed I heard commotion in her room and I went upstairs and she was on the floor playing. I told her she had to go to bed but she said her friend wanted to keep playing. But there was no one else in the room, so I assumed she was just being a kid making things up. When the parents came home I told them everything was fine and the little girl behaved. When I got in my car to leave I looked up in the little girl's window because the light was on and I saw the different little girl looking at me through the window. This was not the little girl I was babysitting. It was a dark-haired girl in a bluish dress. The girl I was watching was blonde and in pajamas. It scared the heck out of me and I never went back to babysit for them again. I also believe in ghosts now because I know exactly what I saw and it was not a figment of my imagination. This one is so satisfying and terrifying. When I was 19 or 20 I was sleeping at my girlfriend's studio apt. I was woken up in the middle of the night by the sound of a glass breaking. I opened my eyes and I was facing the kitchen section of the room. Standing in front of the sink was a shadowy figure, almost entirely black. I was only half awake and assumed it was my girlfriend. I asked if anything was wrong and she had said no, go back to sleep. So I did. Woke up the next day and found out it hadn't been my girlfriend after all. I wrote out my main one already, but I have another weird story. Weird to me, at least. Haha, that happened during lockdown. I was working from home last summer, so I was being very productive, by which I mean napping. Now, I'm not a napper at all, but for some reason last year, I was napping all the time. I'm also not much for remembering my dreams. Years can go by before I have one, but on this afternoon last year, I had the most vivid dream that I still think about all the time. In this dream, I was walking in London. It was winter, very cold, and I was walking through a residential area, but there was a little open space fenced off with an ornate, black, wrought iron fence on my left. I passed a man who had a workaday London accent, and he said, "Watch out ahead, love, there's ice and it's slippery." In my dream, I was ecstatic, repeating over and over again to myself, "I'm home, I'm home, I'm home." I was absolutely filled, suffused with joy at being home. I was trying to walk as quickly as I could but being careful not to slip on any ice. I knew where I was going. It was Victoria Road. I knew I was in Kensington. I knew that I was going to my home, which was built with yellow brick. I knew these things, just as basic information, just as I know my name or my age. I woke up before I got to this home, and I was crushed that the dream was over. I felt like crying that it was ripped away from me before I got home. I've lived in England, but I've never lived in London. I've only been there a handful of times. I've never been to Victoria Road. I've never even heard of it that I know of. I have been to Kensington, but that was only to visit Harrods. When I think of brick, I picture red brick, never yellow. I looked on Google Maps. Victoria Road is a real road. It's in Kensington. It has buildings with yellow brick. Did I have someone else's dream? LOL, that's all information that I swear I didn't have in my head before that dream. And I can tell you this absolutely, that my heart still aches when I think about going home. And I still almost feel like crying with homesickness for this place I've never been and only saw in a dream at least a year ago. I can't make any sense of it. That was your past life's home. I had a similar dream. A really neat circular wooden house built into the side of a cliff above the ocean. My sister was there, waiting for me to come back. I was 14 and my sister was 13. We lived in a town in Pennsylvania that doesn't really exist anymore. It was summer, hot, no air conditioning. This is maybe 3 years before my parents got central air. We had the windows open the entire summer like every summer. We lived near a creek and could hear it babbling if it rained really hard the day before. In the summer it was always low and so we never heard it during those months. Other than insects and cars driving down the interstate towards or away from the quarry mine. If you were on our property, you didn't hear much. It was not rural but almost. There was a frosty freeze and 6-7 other shops about 2 miles away. My parents went out on a date and left my sister and I home. 2 young girls, but we had been left at home for almost 3-4 years at this point. We were used to it. We cooked a pizza and were watching TV after our parents left. The phone rang just as we heard what sounded like a person somersault across the roof of our house. My sister answered the phone, but when she picked up heard nothing but static. But not a usual static noise. She explained it like a slowed down static hum, like if a TV channel mixed with an egg beater on low. She said hello a few more times, listened to the egg beater static for a few more seconds, then hung up. We went back to watching TV and thought nothing of it. Maybe 40 minutes later, we hear footsteps on the roof. Very soft footsteps. I remember listening to almost 10 before looking at my sister, who was also looking at me with a white face in complete shock. Eventually we came up with the nerve to get up and go outside and look. Just barely visible behind our large, already outdated TV antenna, was a man lying face down on our roof. He was tall, skinny, and had huge white tennis shoes on. He was kind of an outline shape except for his shoes, which seemed to glow. My sister was spooked. I was crazy. I started to scream at the man. I threw a few small rocks and missed him terribly. He didn't move. My sister was tugging at me to get back inside. Finally, after realizing the man wasn't moving, I got freaked out and ran inside too. We huddled in my parents' room. Nothing for almost 20 minutes. Felt like 2 hours. Our parents weren't due home until midnight and we had no way of reaching them in 1995. Then we hear a knocking sound, like the man is knocking on our roof like it was a front door. I had had enough. I rush outside, dragging my sister, ready to confront this crazy person. We now see him lying face down on the first top line of the roof, his arms and feet dangling on either side of the lip. We freak, lock ourselves in the basement. Our parents find us in the morning. I pee myself while sleeping. Never found out what it was about and my dad thought we were lying. This is one of the most horrifying things I've read. I have chills now. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.